If you're following the latest fad diet to lose weight, it will backfire, and here's why. Wait, how am I getting comments already? I just started the video. Okay, Tina, I get that keto's been a lifesaver for you. And Sarah, I see your comment about Ozempic completely changing your life, but that's just not the case for everyone. Because right now, while you're watching, there are millions of women who put on even more weight once these approaches stop working. Or in your case, Sarah, when they're no longer affordable. And if you're one of them, wondering why you can't stick to anything long enough to get results, I promise you're not broken. All of these fad diets you keep following are. Wait, another comment? John, that is great that you lost 78 pounds with carnivore, but I'm not really talking to you. I'm talking to women over 40 who just want to get to a healthy weight without completely giving up nachos, if that's okay with you, John. Here's what I need you to know about me before we go any further. After losing 100 pounds following 2 pregnancies, I felt like I had the ultimate success story. I wrote several books, hosted a podcast, and I was even featured in People magazine. After 20 years of struggle, I thought I found the holy grail of fat loss. But that same diet that helped me lose 100 pounds, it led to me regaining 50 back. And no matter how perfectly I followed the rules, tracking every macro and following every restriction, my scale just kept going up. Here's what nobody talks about in all of those before and after photos. What happens 5 years into any fad diet? So today, I'll share the real story of why fad diets always backfired for me and why they'll backfire for you too, using the exact 4-point framework that finally set me free. The fad I followed the longest was keto, but maybe for you it's carnivore, plant-based, intermittent fasting, or maybe you moved on to the newest trend, weight loss medications like Ozempic and Wegovy. But here's what's different about this video. I'm not going to tell you which diet to follow. Instead, I'll show you why they all stop working, especially for women over 40, and what actually works long term. This applies to any approach that promises quick results without addressing the basic fundamentals. You know, all of those diets that seem way too good to be true, mostly because they are. If you keep cutting entire food groups, slashing calories even lower, and forcing smaller and smaller eating windows, but you still can't get your scale to budge, or you've regained weight despite following all of the rules, then this video is for you. Here's the first problem nobody warned me about when I fell face first into the world of extreme diets. Those first few months, the weight came off fast and I was thrilled. My scale was moving, my clothes were fitting better, and I felt like I finally cracked the code. And I followed all of the rules of my new miracle plan, which for me was keeping carbs to under 20 grams while eating a lot more fat and trusting that as long as I stayed in ketosis that everything else would just fall into place. Maybe for you it's just eating meat or only eating in a 4-hour window. Maybe you rely on a weekly injection to suppress your appetite. But I made a huge mistake that far too many dieters make. Since my diet was all about cutting carbs while ramping up fat, I never really paid attention to protein. And it never even crossed my mind to cross over to the weight side of the gym. Mostly because every keto expert told me that I just needed to cut carbs in order to lose weight. Many of them also said that exercise was optional and that deviating from their strict protocol, even a little, would ruin all of my hard work. But here's what actually happened. When you lose weight fast, up to 40% of what you lose is muscle. And since muscle is your metabolic engine, once you lose the engine, you lose the ability to keep any of the weight off. And this same muscle loss problem, it's happening big time with millions of people who are relying on weight loss medications. But what I figured out next was even worse. When your appetite is so suppressed that you can barely eat, you're not getting enough protein to maintain muscle while losing weight. So yes, the scale drops fast, but you're setting yourself up for the same metabolic slowdown that I experienced. But if you're still thinking, since the scale is moving, that what you're doing is working, that mindset is setting you up for even faster weight regain. Because if your scale shoots down 5 pounds every single week, that won't matter because quick weight loss means that you are losing the wrong kind of weight, which is slowing your metabolism down. Meaning you'll soon count yourself among the 95% of women who regain every pound. Remember, even though every extreme diet promises quick results, Quick results means that you're losing the wrong kind of weight. But muscle loss was just the beginning of my problems. About 2 years into loosely maintaining my results, and I say loosely because if I'm being honest, I was still struggling with losing and regaining the same 10 or 20 pounds for over 5 years. But a few years into keto, something started changing. I was still following all of the rules, tracking every macro, following every restriction, but there I was, flopped on the couch, struggling to keep my eyes open by 11 a.m., which soon became a daily occurrence. And then the migraine started. Not just occasional headaches, but debilitating migraines where it hurt to even just lift my head, or any time one of my kids slid the door open to my blacked out bedroom. And this happened several times each week. I went from being active to someone who could barely squeeze through the day. I'd come home from picking my kids up and immediately collapse on the couch. Weekend trips to the park soon became weekend naps. My step count was over 10,000 daily steps before, but now it was maybe 3,000 on a good day. If you're nodding along thinking, yeah, that is exactly what happened to me, I'm not surprised because I've heard the same story dozens of times. But here's what I didn't understand. My body was stuck in emergency mode. Because when you follow extreme diets for years, whether that's keeping carbs extremely low, eating only one type of food, strictly limiting your eating window, or suppressing your appetite so much that you actually start feeling like you have an eating disorder, your body thinks you're in a famine. It's like your internal alarm is constantly going off screaming, "We're in danger, save energy." Your stress hormones stay elevated and your energy crashes. Your body does whatever it can to slow your metabolism down. And here's what's concerning about some of the stories I hear about women who rely on these weight loss medications. They are dealing with the same constant fatigue and a lack of energy, plus they have strange side effects that definitely need the attention of a doctor, not someone else's opinion in a Facebook group. When you're eating so little that you can't fuel basic daily activities, your body goes into that same emergency mode. Back when I completely tanked my stress hormones from staying keto for too long, the more exhausted I became, the less I moved. The less I moved, the more weight I gained, even though I was following every diet rule. I was trapped in this cycle where being perfect with a restrictive approach was actually making me gain weight. I kept thinking that I needed to be even more strict. So I tried cutting carbs lower while fasting even longer, but none of it worked. I was basically having a fist fight with my biology, but my biology was definitely taking the Mike Tyson approach. And I do mean the dirty one that he would much rather you forget about. But what came next is what really knocked me out, because it turns out all of that stress and exhaustion, they were just symptoms of a much bigger problem. As a woman over 40, I was already dealing with changing hormones, whether I wanted to believe it or not. Creeping into perimenopause was messing with my sleep, my energy, and how my body stored fat. But adding years of following extreme dietary restrictions was like throwing gasoline onto an already raging fire. Years later, here's what I learned about what was really happening. My thyroid, which is like the master control center for your metabolism, began slowing down, even more than it naturally does with age. The chronic stress from restricting everything I craved kept my cortisol levels high, which made my body store even more fat around my middle. My sleep just kept getting worse and worse, with me waking up at 2 or 3 a.m., struggling to fall back asleep for no reason at all, which made it impossible to stick to any kind of healthy eating habits during the day. It was like my body's control center was sending store fat and slow your metabolism down signals 24/7, no matter how perfectly I tried to stick to my diet. But the worst part was the metabolic prison that I created. After years of extreme restriction, it's like my body forgot how to handle normal foods and eating patterns. For me, even just eating 40 or 50 grams of carbs in a day, which is still considered pretty low carb, that made me gain 2 or 3 pounds overnight, which made me absolutely terrified of eating any carbs since my scale just kept going up no matter what I did. And I didn't want to do anything to make the problem worse. Maybe for you, it's being terrified of eating before noon. Or you panic if you accidentally eat something that's not approved by your favorite diet guru. Or if you use weight loss medications, maybe you're dreading the thought of ever stopping them. And by this point, I know exactly what you're thinking. Okay, Nissa, that's a great story, but how am I supposed to fix this? Which is something that took me 30 years to figure out. The problem with following any extreme approach for too long is you lose metabolic flexibility. Before starting restrictive approaches, your body is like a fireplace that can burn both wood and coal. But following extreme methods for too long turned my body into a one fuel system. And once that system started breaking down, I didn't have a backup plan. I couldn't eat normally at restaurants. I was never able to enjoy birthday cake with my kids. And every social situation became a minefield where I was doing all of these strange things like pulling the cheese off of pizza so I could pretend to enjoy the party just like everyone else. This approach that was supposed to finally give me food freedom made me feel more restricted than ever. But this final point, this is the breakthrough that finally changed everything. The final straw came when my body completely rebelled. I reached a point where if I ate less than 80 grams of carbs in a day, or if I fasted any longer than 12 hours, all that did was trigger another debilitating migraine that lasted for days. And this was my body rejecting the diet that previously helped me lose 100 pounds. But I kept trying anyway because every expert, every success story, and every piece of advice I scrolled past said that this is the only way. Well, actually, when I was ready to get back on track, the diet world was becoming even more extreme. They were placing even more foods off limits while promoting smaller and smaller eating windows. And these days, there's an entire new group that claim all you need is to get on medication and that's what will solve all of your problems. That's when I finally realized that the problem wasn't me. It was always falling for another quick fix. I wasn't able to get back on the path to health until I completely flipped my beliefs. So instead of asking, how extreme do I have to be this time? Instead, I started asking, how can I work with my body instead of against it? And here's what finally worked. Not just for a month, not just for 6 months. But this is what helped me finally lose those 50 pounds while maintaining a healthy weight without constantly struggling. First, I started eating more protein, working my way up to 120 to 150 grams most days, while also focusing on strength training to rebuild all of that muscle that I lost. I slowly added more variety into my diet while monitoring how these foods made me feel, not just how they affected the scale. I also focused on getting better sleep while putting more effort into managing stress. And if you're currently using weight loss medications, you need to quit just relying on the medications for results. Because if you want results that last, you still have to form all of the same habits. You need to focus on the fat loss fundamentals that apply to everyone. Adequate protein, strength training, a moderate calorie deficit, and more movement. This is how you build a fat loss strategy that works forever. Reclaiming my health over 40 wasn't fast. It took many months to undo the years of metabolic damage all of these quick fix diets caused. But gradually, my energy came back, the migraine stopped, and I could finally eat like a normal adult without completely fearing the scale the next day. Most importantly, I found a way to maintain a healthy weight without living in a constant food prison. Your body isn't designed to run on stress and restriction forever. I promise you, there is a much better way to lose fat over 40, one that works with your hormones, not against them. I just walked you through the complete breakdown of why fad diets fail, with the same big 4 revelations that finally opened my eyes to what actually works. Now you have everything you need to avoid the metabolic damage that I went through, so you can build a sustainable fat loss plan instead. But here's the thing, knowing this information and implementing it are 2 different things. So if you're tired of starting over every Monday and you are finally done with the fad diet cycle for good, I can take everything I've learned about sustainable fat loss and put together a personalized coaching plan that finally works for you. Not just for the next 6 months, but a plan that works forever. If you want a sneak peek of how I build my clients' plans that finally gets them results that they have been chasing for years, watch this video next. I break down the exact system I build for my clients that help them get results in as little as 5 minutes a day, which is the same system that finally got me out of never-ending yo-yo diets for good. Whether you choose to keep scrolling in search of another quick fix, or you actually take my advice that this slow and steady method is the method that will finally work, the choice is yours. But I can promise you that your future self will thank you for choosing something that is sustainable over these quick fixes every single time.